I'm Amy Bateman. Welcome to my farm here in Cumbria. I'm a photographer with my own niche, I would say. I photograph like lakeland life. That's what I'm known on social media for. Thankfully I live on a farm, so I've got plenty of it on my doorstep. But I'm also a commercial photographer now, doing products, people and places here in my home county of Cumbria, right on the edge of the Lake District. And if you're not distracted by the view behind us here, here on my farm in Cumbria, we do farm photography tours. We've got some glamping pods now where you can come and stay and see the landscapes that I photograph here, and some and capture some of your own photographs as well. I'm here today with Wex and Sony doing an online masterclass which will go out shortly. You'll be able to see and chat along with us on the internet, ask any questions you like, and I'll hopefully be able to answer them. So here's my kit bag that I've got with me. I shoot Sony cameras. I've got two cameras. My main camera, which I do most of my images on, is the A7R3. It's a 42 megapixel sensor. So even if my lens isn't quite got the reach, I'm quietly confident that the cropping ability will help me just reach into that image a bit more without losing any of the quality. This is the A7R3 here with one of my favourite lenses on. This is the 70-200 G Master lens. It's a f2.8 aperture. So even if we were to shoot those cows down there, I get some really nice soft bokeh with that wide open aperture of the 2.8. It's really quite nice and sharp at the 2.8. And that pleases me because I don't want a lens that I can't use at every single bit of its range. I've got on here a teleconverter as well. I've just bought this, I haven't had a lot of chance to practice with it. I've got the 1.4 because there are times where I wanted just a bit of extra reach, but I didn't want to have to go up and buy the next size up lens. I wouldn't use it very often, whereas that just means I've got a bit more versatility for the lenses that I do have, so that every lens range is increased by 1.4 times when I pop the teleconverter on. So the A7R3 and my A7 III, which is my backup camera, I probably use just as much as each other now. They're Sony mirrorless cameras, and they've got the wonderful eye autofocus, which I photograph a lot of people and a lot of animals, and I've got the security then that when I point it at a human being and I've got the human eye autofocus on, or I point it at an animal and I've got the eye autofocus on, that it will capture the eye and it'll focus the eye and make sure that that is the nicely sharp focal point for that image. It stops me missing loads of shots. I get the shots quickly, so there's a lot of movement. I can be really confident that the camera is helping me get the best shot that I can. So looking at the rest of the lenses that I've got in my kit bag, this is probably one of my favourite lenses. It's the one I will put on all the time if I'm just taking my camera out and about with me and I'm not really sure what I'm shooting. It's the 24-70 G Master lens. And again, this is a 2.8, so really nice bokeh if you want to shoot wide open at 2.8. I do a lot of storytelling images where I quite like that separation of the subject from the background. So stepping down the aperture, going really wide open, helps get that separation. There are times where I want nice sharp focus front to back, but I think my style is leaning much more towards that very shallow depth of field. Which is why I'm enjoying these lenses. So the 24-70's got a really lovely, useful range. It's really sharp right at the 24 end, really sharp at the 70 end, incredibly versatile. And if I'm never sure of what lens to use, I'll pop that one on. So the A7 III is my backup camera. I say it's my backup camera. I probably use it just as much now because I actually stick a different lens on it whenever I'm on a shoot to save me changing lenses so much. I do clean my own sensors, but if you can reduce how often you change your lenses, then obviously that reduces the time that you're actually needing to spend cleaning. And it's such a capable camera that I don't worry about its slightly smaller sensor size too much. They're both incredibly capable cameras and I love the jobs that they do for me. Now, this is one of my favourite lenses. Apart from the fact it's actually got a very, very clever lens hood with a lovely rubber end to it. which helps when you push it against glass, but it also helps if you bump things. So I won't bother putting it on. This is the 1.4 85mm G Master lens. It is a little bit weighty. I had the other 85mm, which was just a 2.8, but I decided the compromise to get that extra shallow depth of field with a 1.4 was worth carrying the extra weight. It's not the sort of lens you're going to whap on and carry around with you all day anyway. I normally have my kit bag, so I'm not too worried about the weight. So that's what's in my kit bag. So we've come here to one of the ponds on our farm. Now this is private land, so the only way you get to come is if you come on a farm photography tour. And this is one of my favourite places to shoot. We've got this pond which is natural. When it's completely still and there's no wind, you get the beautiful reflections of the bulrushes lying beautifully, the reflections floating towards you. And that's really nice. And at dusk, the sun sets just over there, lights up the bank of bulrushes, and you get the lovely reflections. Now today we've come down here and there's some families of ducks. They are just mallards. We've just seen some coots and some moorhens wander off, but they're not too bothered about us at the moment, and they've given a really nice sort of image in the foreground. And then if we look at the background, we've got this beautiful S-curve that's caused on the hillside there with the wall leading into the hedge lines. And the hedges and walls in farmland give really lovely leading lines. They create shapes and formations, and it's definitely worth looking at them and not ignoring them. Rather than looking at the bigger picture, look at actually what's in the picture right in front of you and the smaller details. Because I love that S-curve, and in winter when it's covered in snow, that S-curve stands out really, really proudly. In fact, I've got a great image, black and white image of that S-curve, and it works really, really well. So we come here today, we've got some of our lambs here, just eating away on some herbal leys that's been planted here. So they're fattening, doing a good job for us. But even today, there's some lovely pictures of the lambs resting in the shade underneath the trees. They make great photographs on them all. Lots of photographers find sheep under trees quite photogenic. So as the sunlights come down, casting a shadow, you will often find a group of animals just taking a bit of shelter there. Lovely to add into the photograph. But I've just got an image now with all the birds on the lake here. We've got the bulrushes in the midground, going up to the background with the S-curve and it leading away into a big sky. There's something about the land here in Cumbria and our farm. We are about 200 feet above sea level, I think. I might be wrong, pretty sure. And we get some really big skies. And even today, the sky is beautiful. I really enjoy taking a lot of contrast and dehaze out of those skies, and it can just add a lot of texture to sometimes what can be an ordinary image. Shooting in the middle of the day, so the sun's quite high, so we need to do something a little bit different, and pulling details out of the sky is quite a really nice way of doing that. So as I'm looking here now, what I would do, the birds have just come in here, so I'm going to try and get the birds in the bottom of the frame, leading through. They've got the central line of the bulrushes, then we're going up and getting that S-curve, and then you've got the sheep behind. So it's a bit of a storytelling image about the landscape that's in front of me. It's telling lots of stories about the life that's living here and the ecosystems that they're in, and also taking into account the different colours and the gradients throughout the land as it slopes off towards the sky. So we'll just see if we can get that now. So I've got, at the moment, I've got my ISO down. I am at 200, just because when it goes shady, I'm not having to fiddle with that, and I just play around with my shutter speed. We've got about 1 to 400 shutter speed because I've got f5.6. So I want the clouds a little bit out of focus, but actually I want the main scene in focus, and I'm focusing more on the bulrushes so that anything in front of them, about a third of the distance into the shot, anything in front of them is in focus. And then I've also got the background in focus too. And we go click and we get that picture. And then I'll edit it that and we'll pop it on, and hopefully you'll be able to see what I've been taking. Now really we need the sunshine in because they're resting under here because it's quite a warm day. We're at the sort of end of summer really. And the sheep love taking shelter underneath any trees, and they're just chewing the cud here. They're probably not running off because these might have been some of my pet lambs. So So I've hand raised them, but they're inquisitive anyway, having a nosy, and it just is a really nice little picture. So we're just going to capture this. I'm going to go with a wide open as much as it's going to do, f2.8, just so that the other sheep in the background aren't a distraction for the image. I'm going to frame it with the trees just there on the right hand side. Get some of the background too, just so that it's telling the story that these are some from a bigger flock, and the landscape's disappearing up the hill there, a bit of the sky. The only thing is that's spoiling it is the grass in front of that sheep's face. So if when I get that back, if it spoils it, I'm not really into the habit of taking a lot out of my pictures. I don't Photoshop them heavily. That I'll either get put in the bin, or I might have a try at removing the grass. But if I went to try and move the grass, it'll just go. It'll disappear and the picture will be ruined. So I'll have a look at it. If it's no good, it'll go in the bin, that shot. Something I really like when I'm photographing farm animals, and you can get this if you're pottering along a footpath or something like that, is capturing them just slightly higher on the horizon. Hello! I think that must have been a pet lamb. Hey. Hello! Hello! Which one are you? Hello! Oh, hello! This doesn't normally happen. You don't just get random sheep coming up to you in a field, do you? You're just helping us make some great content for today. Do you know that? Hey? What are you doing? You just want fussies. You want cuddles? Hello. I'm in a privileged position owning a farm that I can come into our fields and just come, and these animals that know me come up to me. If you want to do this sort of photography yourself, you could try approaching a farmer, but the best bet really is just to explore footpaths. Don't stray from them, please. Farmers' fields are actually private. You would be trespassing if you went into one or went off the footpath. And the Countryside Rights of Way Act, giving you the right to roam. You have to check what is open access on the internet, and the maps are all there on Natural England sites. But at lambing time, there's a lot going on in fields, and there may be footpaths, but some of them get closed at lambing time. And lots of places where you can just stick to the footpaths and go and photograph them. If you want to get up close to animals and photograph and get some portraits and things like that, and you don't know a local farmer or you can't find anywhere, agricultural shows are a great place to go, because you often get really good quality animals being shown there. They're used to being handled, and you'll be able to get close up with your camera lots of different breeds. And in fact, I still love going to agricultural shows and capturing a different range of breeds than we've got here, even on the farm. And you'll get cows, you get sheep, you get goats, hens. You are just stealing the show completely. You do know that, aren't you? You are just stealing the show. Yeah, how much more content do you want of me cuddling a sheep, for goodness sake? I mean, you are lovely. You are lovely, aren't you? Hey? Trying to take a sheep selfie. Hey, what's that? So, as I was saying before we were interrupted by my furry friend, some images I really like is getting a horizon. When the animals are standing on the horizon and the sky in the backdrop, you can either get them into silhouette, so you take it so that everything's dark and then you just got the brightness of the sky behind, or it just adds a really interesting element when you've got nothing but landscape, the horizon and the animals on the horizon. So I'll take a few now and we'll just see, once I've edited them, see how they come out and see if I can show you what I mean. I'm going to introduce our bull to you. He's an Angus. He's normally quite fired up. In fact, he's getting a bit more fired up now, which is why I'm quite glad there's two gates between us, isn't it? But he's an Angus bull, so he's all black, and this is an extra challenge when photographing him. And the principles I apply to photographing him, I would apply to photographing black dogs, black cats, black any animals, and it's really important that you get enough detail into your sensor. And in order to do that really efficiently, even though I'm shooting mirrorless and I can see through my electronic viewfinder, I do want still to try and reduce the grain as much as possible. So rather than just whapping the ISO up, I want it in a range that is so that I can edit it back and get a lot of the noise out, so I get a cleanest picture as possible. but without losing any of his detail. So there's two ways. The light's coming in really nicely and just giving him like a rim light feel look to him. So I could use that. Or, hello, I use my histogram in lots and lots of detail and study it quite closely for the blacks and the highlights to work out how to capture as much detail as possible. So I'll normally in this sort of situation just spend a few minutes playing around with my settings. Because he's quite big and he's fired up, I'm not going to spend too much time just hanging around him. He won't do anything, he'll be absolutely fine, and the cow's keeping him calm. But what I want to do is think about what am I actually taking a photograph of. Now he's a bull and he's got a ring in his nose, and that's really photogenic and it always makes a really nice picture. I've got the bars in the way, and of course these are quite light and they might throw the light for him. So I've got my 24-70 on so I can play around, so I've got some room to manoeuvre. And I'm going to be looking, we'll be able to look at the back of my camera in a minute. I'm going to have it set the histograms on through the viewfinder. Yeah, you're stomping. And I've got animal eye autofocus turned on, I think. Pretty sure I have because it was on earlier. Yeah. And it is still picking up his eye, even though he's black, which is just superb. But he's a bit fired up and he's not staying still. Oh. Anyway, just got a quick picture of his eye just to check the settings. And I've got lots of black areas flashing. My histogram's showing that I'm way, way down. When I first, oh, you're going to be annoying, aren't you? You're not going to let me take your photograph. I'm just going to step back from him so he doesn't get too fired up while I talk. Just taking a first photograph of him, and even though I've got the light coming in from the eye, it's very, very dark all the way around, so I'm going to change my settings. Looking at my histogram, at him, let's just have a look. Now, this sort of situation, I don't think, I'm just going to whack my ISO up. I'm not going to be too bothered about blowing highlights here, so I might chuck the histogram way, way right, because the only highlights they're going to be blown is just going to be some reflections in his eye and around his hair. So we'll have another look, see if he's settled down a bit, having a smell of his mate. Right then, you fella, you're going to show me your ring? So all the time I'm adapting and using my finger on the shutter wheel and the aperture wheel because I'm shooting in manual, changing the histogram and how it's looking, because as he moves into sunlight it's changing all the time. And that's what's so lovely about the electronic viewfinder, it's showing me all the time what my settings, how they're changing the image. Now, as much as I can't get his ring, at least he's in one place now to get his eye. In fact, she's so white and he's so black, it'd be quite cool to get the eyes next to each other if I can. So I'm reading the histogram. I don't worry too much, like I said earlier, about it disappearing into the highlights when I'm focusing on him, because there's not going to be anything massively blown. Oh, nice. So quite a fast shutter speed as well. When working with animals, I generally go to 1 to 200, if not higher, because of the sudden movements when they're just in the fields. But at night now I'm up to 1 to 400 because he's just moving all the time, and even when he lifts up and chews, because they always lift up to chew, he's still moving and about quite a lot, and I want to just freeze that movement. I'm down at about f4 because I would like it a bit more in focus, but I'm also needing to try and reduce my ISO a bit. I'm at ISO 640 here. We'll see what we get. So I want the classic ring shot where you've got the bull's ring, but if I zoomed in and just had the ring, that would be a shot on its own, so we've just got the nose and the ring. But then I want to maybe pan back, so I'm zooming all the time, which is why this lens is so useful. So I can pan back and then get the full head. But of course his ears and his eyes will be out of focus because I'm going with a shallow depth of field to focus on the ring. But then equally, there's lots of shots that can be had here. 2 heads buried into the hay for feeding, so I can get both of them together. It's not hay actually, it's silage, but it looks like hay because it's so dry. We don't actually make hay. So I'm just waiting for them to get both together. There we go, that's quite a nice picture. Anybody would think I didn't feed them. I think it's the novelty of a lunchtime feed for these guys. And then that shot there, where he's turning sides on, that's when you want your focus point to be on the eye. Otherwise it just looks wrong. The eye's got to be in focus when you're doing short close-ups of animals. Unless you're doing a particular feature like just the ring itself. Come on fella, lift your head up. Okay, so this is a picture here I've just taken with the bull, and there's huge amounts of dark areas, but we are dealing with a really high contrast area here, really contrasty. So we've got really quite bright on the ring and the bars, really dark into the shadows. So this is why I was using my histogram, and I'll show you the histogram on this. So you can see there that the blacks are clipped massively. So the histogram, we've got blacks at this side, we've got the whites at that side. These are the other colour channels. I'm only concerned about one really. So you can see that the highlights here, I'm not sure if you can just see, just dripping off just before the end, so that I know that on that picture, if we just go back to it, that the ring's not clipped and these bars are not clipped. But if we have a look at the dark, I'm not really bothered. I don't need any information in there. So the camera's not been able to record any information in the blacks. They are just as black as they can be. But I did a shot with the same here, with a different shutter speed, so it let more light in, and it just looks too blown now. Some of that might recover in post, but then if we look at the histogram, you can see that it's clipped the right hand side there. So we have gone too bright, which is why the actual ring's flashing as well as some of the darks. So if anything, that would end up in my trash bin. So even at 1 to 2500, an ISO of 640, I generally go up to about 1000 before I worry about any grain and noise. And we're wide at 2.8 for this lens. So this image, that is being clipped, and the only way by looking at it really is knowing that from the histogram. So I saw that in the histogram when I was taking the photograph, so I adjusted my settings, got one slightly a little bit darker. I'm not concerned about the darks, and that's how it balances the light. What I will do in post is just lift the shadows, which will lift a bit more features out of here that's not clipped around the black, in order to be able to get some more information out of the actual black of the animal. Thanks ever so much for joining us for this WEX Masterclass. Photographing British farmland here on our farm in Cumbria. We do farm photography tours, so you can actually come and photograph the bulls in safety and get really close up and with the animals. If you can't do that, don't forget to ask permission when you go onto farms. You're fine on footpaths and things like that, but please don't forget to ask permission. You may find that it gets you access to some other places if you're nice, and you could get some shots a bit like mine. So my top tips, other than asking permission, I would highly recommend your lens hood. Get it out of the box when you get your lens and put it on. I dropped this camera out of the back of my car, smashed the lens hood. This is the second one, but thankfully I didn't smash the lens. So me and my insurance are intact still, thankfully. Another top tip, put your polarizing filter on when you're trying to shoot outside. It really helps you control the sky on a bright day like today, or if you're shooting water. Another top tip, when you're shooting animals or children, is pop the shutter speed up to at least 1 to 200 to capture and freeze frame that movement. Sure, it depends what sort of creative effect you're looking for. You might want a bit more movement in your image, that's fine. But if you are just wanting to capture your children playing, your dogs playing, your animals, whatever you've got, popping it up to at least 1 to 200. I generally go about 1 to 400 if my kids are moving around quickly, and that freezes the action for enough to be able to get a sharp shot. And my final top tip is to try and learn to use and access your histogram. With Sony's, one of the benefits of being able to have an electronic viewfinder from the mirrorless system is that my histogram is active all the time, and it changes to what settings I'm using, so I can realise what's clipped in the low lights, what's clipped in the highlights, and make the adjustments before I even press the shutter. Depending on what camera system you have, try and get used to it. It'll help you saving a load of images from going into the trash, and you get better results. If you're interested in becoming a professional photographer, I would really recommend you learn your camera inside out. I did go and do an evening class which got me started on that, and I got my camera manual, I watched YouTube videos, I read the magazines and knew exactly what I was doing, so that I could be confident I was providing high quality images for my client. Because if somebody pays me for taking the photograph, I want to be able to take the best photograph of that subject that anybody possibly could. And by doing that, the only way to do that is to know your camera inside out. I would like to say thank you very much to WEX for giving me the chance to come and talk to you today. I'd like to say thank you to the guys at Sony, especially Mark Baber, and thank you to the weather gods who's helped us today, having a fabulous day on the farm. Is that all right?
Yeah, that is